As you open the Bible, you might notice something strange, a dichotomy. On one hand, you read about a God who loves, forgives, and offers salvation, a God whose mercy is endless. Yet on the other hand, there's a different side of this same God, one who commands destruction, plagues, and judgment. It seems almost as if you're reading about two different beings. But what if that's not just a coincidence? What if we've been misled for over 2,000 years? Imagine for a moment that the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, isn't exactly the same as the loving Father preached by Jesus in the New Testament. What if these two sides of God, one full of wrath, the other full of love, have been purposely merged together over time to serve a specific narrative? This question, this mystery, is one that has haunted scholars, theologians, and seekers alike. Could it be that the true nature of God has been obscured, hidden from us by a narrative designed to maintain power and control? If you've ever wondered why the Bible seems to present such a complex picture of the Creator, this journey into understanding the duality of God might just provide some answers. Stay with me as we explore the hidden truths about Yahweh and the God of love, two figures who have shaped humanity for millennia. Together, we will question everything we thought we knew about God and uncover the stories that have been carefully left out of the Bible. It's time to awaken to a deeper truth, one that's been veiled for centuries. Are you ready to seek the truth with me? Let's dive in. Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, is a figure that commands both fear and awe. When we turn the pages of the Bible, we're met with stories of a mighty God who is quick to anger, swift to judge, and unyielding in his justice. From the moment the Israelites were freed from slavery in Egypt, Yahweh's presence was undeniable. He parted the Red Sea, raining down plagues on Egypt, and brought a powerful wrath upon Pharaoh's army. These stories paint a picture of a God who demands obedience and punishes disobedience without hesitation. When his people rebelled, Yahweh's anger was poured out in devastating ways. The ground opened up to swallow Korah and his followers for challenging his authority, Numbers 16, and he ordered the destruction of entire cities, such as Sodom and Gomorrah, because of their sin, Genesis 19. But this wasn't just about physical destruction, it was a force of nature, a divine judgment that wasn't to be taken lightly. Yahweh didn't simply ask for worship, he demanded it, and the consequences of defiance were swift and severe. His commands were not just rules to follow, but mandates of survival. As we read through the scriptures, we see a pattern emerging. Yahweh's ways were often about establishing his dominion, his righteousness, and his holiness. It was through power, might, and authority that his people learned to fear him. The Israelites were taught to worship Yahweh not out of love, but because of the sheer terror of what would happen if they didn't. In Exodus, when Moses brought down the tablets of the Ten Commandments, he saw the people had turned to idolatry by worshipping a golden calf. In his anger, Yahweh commanded that those who sinned be put to death. Exodus 32:25-28. The law of Yahweh was harsh, yes, but it was also a tool for shaping a people who would be set apart for his purposes. His laws were clear. Disobedience led to death, and only through perfect adherence could one survive his judgment. In Yahweh's world, the rules were black and white. His wrath was a testament to his holiness, and anyone who violated his commands would face severe consequences. But in the New Testament, a shift occurs. Enter Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who brings with him a radically different portrayal of the divine. Jesus' teachings are filled with love, forgiveness, and grace. He reaches out to the outcasts, the poor, the sick, the sinners, and offers them compassion and redemption. In Matthew chapter 5:44, Jesus tells his followers, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." This is not the wrathful Yahweh of the Old Testament. This is a God who turns the other cheek, who offers his life on a cross for the forgiveness of sins. The difference is striking. Jesus doesn't bring wrath but healing. He doesn't demand obedience through fear, but through love. He speaks of a Father in heaven who is gentle and kind, who does not hold our mistakes against us, but forgives our trespasses. Matthew 6:12. It's a message of hope, not fear, a promise of redemption rather than destruction. Jesus even challenges the status quo, forgiving sins that no one thought could be forgiven, healing those who were untouchable by society, and speaking out against the religious leaders who used Yahweh's laws as a weapon to control the people. The New Testament God feels different. The judgment and destruction we read about in the Old Testament seem distant, replaced by mercy and a call to love. In the Gospel of John, Jesus calls God Abba, a term of endearment akin to daddy, symbolizing an intimate and loving relationship with the Creator. Jesus' God is a Father who understands our struggles, who walks alongside us in our pain, and who offers grace instead of wrath. Jesus even takes the punishment for humanity's sins upon himself, offering forgiveness to all who believe, despite their past. This stark contrast between the wrathful Yahweh and the loving Father, revealed through Jesus, is not an isolated shift. It's a transition in the understanding of who God is and how he interacts with his people. The Old Testament presents God as a sovereign ruler, maintaining control through fear and judgment, while the New Testament portrays God as a compassionate Father, seeking to reconcile with his creation through love and mercy. It's as if two different faces of God are revealed across these two covenants. Yahweh, the powerful, judgmental God of the Old Testament, and the loving Father, revealed through Jesus, offer us two different understandings of divinity. But what do we do with this? Is it possible that the God of wrath and the God of love can be the same? How do we reconcile these two depictions of the divine? The answer lies in understanding the fullness of God's character. The God of the Old Testament was not devoid of love. His judgment was a reflection of his holiness, his desire for his people to live righteously. Similarly, the God of the New Testament is not a God without wrath. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross was the ultimate act of justice, bearing the wrath that humanity deserved. In a sense, both sides of God are part of a whole, a God who is just, holy, and loving all at once. The New Testament doesn't erase the Old Testament, it fulfills it. Jesus doesn't negate the wrath of God, but he absorbs it on our behalf, showing us the depth of God's love and justice. This revelation of God's nature calls us to deeper reflection. We can no longer simply view God as a distant ruler or an unapproachable judge. We must learn to embrace both his justice and his mercy, his holiness and his love. The Old Testament teaches us about the gravity of sin and the holiness of God, while the New Testament calls us to live in the freedom of grace and love. Through this balance, we learn to approach God not out of fear of punishment, but out of a reverence for his goodness and a desire to live according to his will. In our own lives, this duality in God's nature reminds us that true justice and love are not mutually exclusive. We are called to live with both, standing firm in our convictions and in God's truth, while extending mercy and forgiveness to those around us. Just as Jesus reconciled the wrath and love of God, we too are called to embody this balance in our relationships, our communities, and our understanding of the world. As we ponder this, we are invited to take a deeper look into the historical and theological evolution of our understanding of God. What if the Old Testament portrayal of God and the New Testament revelation are not contradictions, but a reflection of the fullness of God's character, revealed progressively to humanity And what if this understanding calls us to live more fully in the freedom of grace while honoring the depth of God's justice and holiness? In the end, we are reminded that God, in all his complexity, is beyond our full comprehension. But it is through the story of Jesus that we begin to see the full picture. A God who is both just and merciful, a God who is both fierce and loving. We cannot fully understand him, but we can choose to trust in his nature and seek to live in alignment with his will, embracing both the grace and the responsibility he offers us. So, as we continue this journey of discovery, we now turn to explore how these two faces of God, Yahweh's judgment and Jesus' love, come together to form a unified narrative. Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, is often depicted as a figure of immense power and authority, commanding both reverence and fear. When we look at the stories in the first half of the Bible, we encounter a God who is not just a ruler, but a warrior. Yahweh is often seen unleashing plagues, bringing wars to fruition, and instructing his people to destroy entire nations. From the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah to the plagues upon Egypt, Yahweh's wrath is a dominant theme. This is the God who demands the utmost loyalty and obedience. If his people stray from his commands, the punishment is swift and often severe. In the book of Exodus, after leading the Israelites out of Egypt, Yahweh gives Moses the 10 Commandments. But the moment Moses descends from the mountain and sees the Israelites worshipping a golden calf, Yahweh's anger flares. He commands that those who led the rebellion be put to death, and a significant number of people face the consequences of their disobedience. Exodus chapter 32, 25-28. His anger, in this instance, is a reflection of his holiness and his need for his people to remain faithful to him. However, the God of the Old Testament, while feared for his wrath, also embodies an underlying sense of justice. The harsh punishments were not random acts of cruelty, but consequences of turning away from the God who freed them, the God who provided for them, and the God who delivered them from the oppression of Egypt. Through these acts, Yahweh demonstrated that he could not be taken lightly. His justice was a force that could not be escaped. It was only by adhering to his law and honoring him that the Israelites could find favor and protection. Yet, there is also a paradox within these actions. The same God who brought these severe judgments also provided grace, such as in the instance of the Passover, where the Israelites were spared from the final plague, Exodus 12. This grace, however, was conditional upon obedience, a recurring theme throughout the Old Testament. The people were called to live in covenant with Yahweh, and while his wrath could be fierce, his promises of mercy were just as certain when his people turned back to him. Now, as we move into the New Testament, we begin to encounter a different facet of God. This shift becomes most apparent when we read the teachings of Jesus. Gone is the God who strikes down the disobedient with fire and brimstone. Instead, we encounter a God who teaches love, forgiveness, and peace. Jesus, God incarnate, speaks of a Father who is full of compassion, a God who is gentle and kind. He is not the vengeful deity commanding destruction, but the loving shepherd guiding his flock toward reconciliation and salvation. Take, for example, the parable of the prodigal son, Luke 15:11-32. Here, Jesus portrays God not as a judge ready to condemn, but as a father running toward his wayward son, ready to embrace him with open arms. The father does not demand retribution for the son's reckless behavior, nor does he punish him for leaving. Instead, he celebrates the return of his lost child with love and grace, showing that God's love is not conditional upon our perfection, but is instead an invitation to redemption and restoration. Jesus also teaches his followers to love their enemies and to forgive those who wrong them, turning the traditional understanding of divine justice on its head. In Matthew 5:44, he commands, "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." This is a stark contrast to the God of war and judgment we see in the Old Testament, where enemies were vanquished by divine command. Instead, Jesus advocates for peace, turning the focus not on punitive justice, but on the transformative power of forgiveness and love. The distinction between Yahweh in the Old Testament and God in the New Testament through Jesus is not merely one of temperament, but of approach. While the Old Testament God was often focused on establishing a covenantal relationship with his people through law, commands, and consequences, Jesus emphasizes that the path to God is through faith, love, and grace. Where Yahweh's relationship with the Israelites was grounded in rules to ensure survival and holiness, Jesus offers a relationship grounded in mercy and the promise of eternal life. Jesus did not eliminate Yahweh's justice, but he fulfilled it. The God of the Old Testament, who required blood sacrifice and strict adherence to the law, is the same God who sent his Son to die on the cross for the sins of humanity, offering the ultimate sacrifice for reconciliation. In this way, Jesus embodies both justice and mercy. His death on the cross becomes the ultimate expression of God's justice. Sin is punished, but it is also atoned for. Through this act, God's wrath is satisfied and his love is magnified. This transition from the Old Testament God of judgment to the New Testament God of love challenges us to reconsider how we view divine justice. In the Old Testament, the focus was on external obedience, a structured system where the people's actions determined their relationship with God. In the New Testament, through Jesus, the focus shifts to internal transformation. The justice of God is no longer an external force meted out through plagues or wars, but is fulfilled through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, offering us a new way to experience God's love. However, this shift doesn't mean that justice is no longer important. Jesus still calls us to live justly, to care for the poor, to love our neighbors, and to forgive those who wrong us. But the model for justice has changed. It is no longer about strict adherence to laws and rituals, but about living out the love and grace that Jesus taught. Jesus didn't abolish Yahweh's laws. He fulfilled them and gave us a new way to relate to God, not based on fear of punishment, but on the love and mercy he has shown us. So, what can we learn from this contrast between Yahweh and the God revealed through Jesus? The lesson is clear. God's love, though it can be fierce and demanding, is also unyielding in its mercy. Both sides of God's character, his justice and his love, are necessary for understanding who he is. His love does not negate his justice, and his justice does not negate his love. As followers of Jesus, we are called to embrace both, recognizing that while God is holy and just, he is also merciful and full of grace. This journey of understanding leads us to a deeper appreciation of God's multifaceted nature. It reminds us that God is not just a figure of wrath or love, he is both, working together in harmony. This deeper understanding allows us to appreciate the full picture of God's character and inspires us to live in a way that honors both his justice and his mercy. As we continue exploring the divine story, we'll delve deeper into the alternative views of God, such as those proposed by the Gnostics, and how these views challenge our traditional understanding of who God truly is. As we explore the historical and theological implications of God's nature, we come to a crossroads where a radically different perspective on the divine emerges, one that challenges the traditional understanding of Yahweh and the God revealed through Jesus. This shift in perspective is embodied by the Gnostics, a group of early Christians who saw the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, not as the supreme creator, but as a flawed and lesser deity. The Gnostics believed that Yahweh was what they called the demiurge, a being who, rather than being the ultimate creator, was an inferior, flawed God who created the material world to trap human souls. According to Gnostic thought, Yahweh was not a God of ultimate love or truth, but a being who imposed ignorance and suffering on humanity. In their view, the material world was not a divine creation, but a prison, a place where souls were trapped in flesh and separation from the true, hidden God, whom they referred to as the true God or divine source. This view offered an alternative narrative to the one presented by the mainstream Christian church, which portrayed Yahweh as the singular, supreme deity. The Gnostics saw the physical world as inherently flawed, a creation of the demiurge designed to keep souls enslaved in ignorance. They believed that the true God was not Yahweh, but an unknowable, transcendent force beyond the physical realm. In this narrative, Yahweh was seen as a tyrant, trying to control and subjugate humanity by keeping them in darkness. The true purpose of life, according to the Gnostics, was to break free from this material prison and return to the divine source. This belief system was centered on the idea of gnosis, knowledge that could lead the soul to salvation by awakening it to its true spiritual nature beyond the constraints of the physical world. To the Gnostics, the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, represented the epitome of control, fear, and falsehood. They believed that the mission of Jesus was not to die for humanity's sins, as the Orthodox Church claimed, but to awaken humanity to the truth that the true God was beyond the material world, and that salvation lay in transcending the physical realm. The Gnostic Gospels, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the Gospel of Judas, contain teachings that reflect this worldview. These texts, which were deemed heretical by the early church, present a radically different portrayal of Jesus, one in which he is not a savior dying for sins, but a guide to spiritual awakening and self-discovery. For example, in the Gospel of Judas, Jesus is portrayed as laughing at his disciples for not understanding the true nature of God. He reveals to Judas that he is the only one who truly understands the secret knowledge necessary to break free from the false god's control. In this gospel, Judas is not the villain, but the hero, helping Jesus fulfill his mission to awaken humanity to the hidden truth. This portrayal of Judas as the one who understands, rather than the one who betrays, upends the traditional narrative of betrayal and redemption, suggesting that the true liberation of the soul comes not from obedience to a wrathful God, but from the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. While these ideas were considered heretical by the early Christian church, they resonated with many people in the early centuries of Christianity. The Gnostics' views represented a spiritual awakening, a call to question the established narrative of God's nature and the purpose of life. Their belief in a hidden, transcendent God, who could be known only through personal, esoteric knowledge, stood in stark contrast to the Orthodox Christianity that was becoming more institutionalized and focused on obedience and faith. The Church, in its efforts to solidify its authority, moved quickly to suppress Gnostic ideas. The Council of Nicaea, which took place in 325 AD, marked a pivotal moment in the consolidation of Orthodox Christianity. Emperor Constantine, seeking to unify the Roman Empire under a single religion, convened the council to standardize Christian beliefs and practices. This was not a theological discussion as much as it was a political move to establish control over the rapidly growing Christian movement. The Council of Nicaea officially affirmed the doctrine of the Trinity and declared the divinity of Jesus, while also condemning many alternative Christian texts and ideas, including Gnostic beliefs. The Gnostics and their teachings were labeled as heretical, and their texts were destroyed or suppressed. Some of these texts, however, have survived through history, such as the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library in Egypt in 1945, which contained many Gnostic writings that had been lost for centuries. These texts offer a radically different view of Jesus, God, and the nature of existence, one that challenges the traditional narrative that has shaped Christian thought for over 2 millennia. What does this mean for us today? The Gnostic perspective invites us to question the conventional understanding of God as presented by both the Old and New Testament. It challenges us to look beyond the literal interpretations of Scripture and explore the deeper, hidden meanings that may have been deliberately suppressed. It suggests that perhaps the true God is not a distant, wrathful deity who demands blind obedience, but a force of love and enlightenment, accessible to all who seek knowledge and self-awareness. This exploration of alternative spiritual paths, while controversial, calls us to think critically about the nature of God, the world, and our place within it. In the face of these alternative views, the mainstream Christian church responded with suppression, labeling anything that threatened its narrative as heresy. The Gnostics, along with other heretical groups, were hunted down and persecuted. The church's response to these alternative beliefs reveals much about the nature of power and control within religious institutions. The early church's need to suppress dissenting ideas highlights the fragility of its authority and the lengths to which it was willing to go to maintain its narrative. By silencing these alternative voices, the church sought to create a singular, unified understanding of God and the universe, one that served its interests and preserved its power. But what if the Gnostic view was right? What if the God of the Old Testament, Yahweh, was not the true God, but a false deity created to maintain control over humanity? What if the true God, the God of light and truth, is still hidden from us, waiting for us to awaken to the deeper mysteries of the universe? The Gnostics believed that humanity's mission was to break free from the illusions of the material world and reconnect with the divine source. Their teachings invite us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about God and challenge us to explore new paths towards spiritual awakening. As we continue this journey, it's important to reflect on the lessons the Gnostics offer us today. They teach us the importance of questioning authority, seeking knowledge, and looking beyond the surface to uncover the hidden truths that lie beneath. They remind us that spirituality is not about blind obedience, but about seeking a deeper connection with the divine, a connection that transcends the material world and opens our eyes to the mysteries of the universe. So, as we move forward in our exploration of God, let us remember the lessons of the Gnostics and their challenge to the traditional narrative. Let us seek the truth, even if it means going against the grain and questioning the beliefs that have been handed down to us. The journey to understanding God is not a simple one, but it is a journey worth taking. And in the end, we may discover that the God we've been searching for is not the one we've been taught to worship, but the one we are meant to awaken to within ourselves. As we come to the end of our journey today, it's time to pause and reflect. We've walked through the pages of the Bible, from the fierce wrath of Yahweh in the Old Testament to the tender love of the Father revealed through Jesus in the New Testament. We've uncovered the profound contrast between these two faces of God and considered the mysterious teachings of the Gnostics that challenge our understanding of both the divine and the material world. It's a journey that has sparked questions and opened doors to deeper understanding, and for that, we should be grateful. But, perhaps more importantly, it's a journey that invites us to continue asking questions, to dig deeper, and to seek the truth beyond the surface of what we've been told. The God we've been taught to worship may not be the complete picture. The duality of Yahweh, the wrathful judge and the loving Father, raises important questions about the nature of divinity and the path to spiritual enlightenment. Are we truly living in harmony with God, or have we been caught in a narrative that has been shaped by those seeking to control our beliefs and our hearts? The stories we've explored today don't just belong in ancient texts, they resonate with us today, challenging us to think more critically about how we relate to the divine, how we understand justice, love, and forgiveness, and how we shape our own spiritual journeys. What if we could see God in a new light? One that encompasses both His justice and His mercy, one that moves beyond the constraints of organized religion and explores the personal relationship between us and the Creator. What if we could free ourselves from the false narratives, the stories that have been handed down for centuries, and seek the truth for ourselves? The truth that may not be found in one book, one interpretation, or one tradition, but in the deep, transformative journey of discovery that each of us is called to undertake. The Gnostics believed that the key to salvation was knowledge, knowledge of the truth, knowledge of the divine within us, and the awakening of our souls to a deeper reality. This is not a journey for the faint of heart, nor is it a path that can be walked by simply accepting what we've been told. It requires us to question, to challenge, and to seek with an open heart. As we ask the tough questions and look beyond the surface of our beliefs, we open ourselves to new possibilities, new understandings, and a deeper connection with the divine. This is where you come in, because your journey doesn't end here. You are invited to continue exploring these questions, to dive deeper into the mysteries of the Bible, the nature of God, and the path to spiritual awakening. Don't let this be just another video that you watch and forget. Let this be the beginning of something greater, something personal, something transformative. If this video has sparked something in you, if it has opened your eyes to new possibilities and inspired you to seek the truth for yourself, then please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Every like, every comment, and every subscription helps us continue this journey together, exploring the mysteries of the Bible, the secrets of the divine, and the hidden truths that have been waiting for us all along. We are living in a time when it is more important than ever to question the narratives that have been handed down to us. As we dive deeper into the Bible, as we explore the lost texts and the forgotten teachings, we may uncover a story that has been suppressed for centuries, a story that could change everything. We may discover that the truth about God is not confined to one interpretation, one book, or one religion, but that it exists beyond the surface, in the hearts of those who seek to know Him. So if you feel that spark of curiosity, if you're ready to uncover the truth and embark on this journey with us, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join us as we dive deeper into the Bible, into the history of faith, and into the mysteries that have been hidden from us for far too long. Together, let's continue to question, explore, and grow in our understanding of the divine. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being a part of this journey. I look forward to exploring more with you in future videos. Until then, keep seeking the truth, keep questioning, and may you find the divine in the most unexpected places. Stay curious, stay inspired, and may your path to spiritual awakening be filled with light, love, and revelation.